thanks for joining us during this beta testing phase for AVAIL. AVAIL is a project that's been in the works for several years here at ArcVision, and you may have seen bits and pieces of the feature set that we're going to be looking at today sprinkled around other products that we've had on the ground over the last few years, but this is all culminating in this product that we now call AVAIL, which is a content management platform designed to manage any and all of the content on your internal network. So when you launch AVAIL, one of the first things that you're going to see is that you will default to what we call a channel. These particular channels that you'll see are what we call Detail Warehouse, which is actually another product that we launched last fall. It's a content product, native Revit drafting views and AutoCAD details. But there's over 27,000 details in these channels, in each respectively for Revit and for AutoCAD. When you launch AVAIL, it's going to default showing you some of those channels, and I'll just show you how the AVAIL platform is being used to manage that content. So here we are on a Detail Warehouse Components channel, which are some native Revit components. There's just under 1,000 files here. What's important to understand about AVAIL is that AVAIL will really act like Windows Explorer on your desktop, and all the way down to the way that the thumbnail views are being displayed. In this case, the Revit family files are being delivered through this channel. What I want to show you in what's important to understand about AVAIL is that the metadata that we're able to associate with content, in this case, we've assigned master format, division number, and section information to each of these details. AVAIL is able to actually store this information. We call them tags, but they're actually key value pairs. So if you're used to using Revit, you're used to seeing parameters, which are, again, key value pairs that are there. One of the things that it lets us do in the AVAIL interface is once you have structured data like that, it allows interesting things like this filters panel, which is going to allow us to now make choices about what it is that we're looking for in this channel. So if I choose openings, I'll go from 983 down to 211 pieces of content with one button click. And if you'll notice in this filters panel, as you begin to make these choices of what you're filtering, AVAIL will automatically drop out the information, the tags that no longer are relevant to your choices. So here I'll choose louvers, and now we're down to a couple of pieces of content. I can open up this side panel and see a high resolution preview and close that. Clicking here on the right, I can clear those filters. If we look at some more detailed information like these door details, you'll notice that again each of these pieces of content has structured data that's been associated with them. And if we look down now in this filters panel, I can choose that I'm looking for a head detail, door detail. So we're going to go from 1,600 pieces down to just shy of 600. Again, as I begin making choices about what I'm looking for, the AVAIL interface will drop out the information that's no longer relevant, and it really makes for a nice way to be able to navigate that content and drill down to what you're looking for. So you can experiment around with the interface once you launch AVAIL by looking through those channels. What most people are interested in, though, is how they can use AVAIL to manage their own content. So I'm going to walk you through how that can be accomplished. So over on the left-hand panel, there is a little expand button. If we expand that, what you're going to see is one, we always have a default My First Channel, which is blank. If you right-click on that, you can either delete it or edit it. So I'm just going to say edit that channel, and we're going to give it a name. So I'm going to call this my Revit Standards library. So we'll call it Revit Standards. And I'm just going to go over here on my network, open up the standards library. Here's some Revit 2016 files. Here's all of the out-of-the-box Revit families that come with Revit. I'm just going to take that families folder and drag it onto this channel. And what you're going to see is it'll pop up a dialog which is showing me all of the folder names that are in that directory structure. So I'm going to say OK. So as this is indexing, you can see here at the top that there are just a little over 1,500 pieces that are indexing in. What's important to understand about AVAIL is that AVAIL doesn't move content around. That process of me dragging that folder onto AVAIL was basically pointing AVAIL to that folder structure and telling AVAIL that we were interested in all the content in those folders being available in this channel. So we refer to these, this as a Revit standards channel. So this is now indexing in. The process, this is in real time, so you can see it's relatively quick. This will take a little over a minute or so for it to index all this content in. We're doing what's called a hash to the content as we index it on your network, which is the way of uniquely identifying each piece of content. So we're not using file names in order to identify the content. We're actually using this way of doing what's called a digital hash of that content, which becomes the key in the database of which content that we're looking at. So we'll just give this another few seconds. So once all this content has been indexed in, you'll see an indicator that it says it's adding those tags, and ultimately it's going to display these thumbnails. So that quickly we've indexed in all of the out-of-the-box Revit families. I'm just going to close that channel up. And you'll notice that it actually indexes in all content, including these type files, which are text files. Just to show that this does act like a Windows Explorer, if I double click on that, it's going to open up Notepad or whatever other application you've associated with that file type. In this case, if I open up my filters panel, we're going to see those folder names that got indexed in. We're also going to see by default what file extensions were indexed in. So I'm going to filter up just to look at these text files. And if I select these and do a Control-A to select all and right-click, I can actually remove these from the channel. So in this case, I don't want to see those text files. Again, they're not being deleted off your network. We're just saying that we don't want to see that those type catalogs or text files in this channel. So here you can see all of those. There's a little over 1,300 pieces of Revit families that were indexed into this channel. As we scroll, we'll see those thumbnails. As we look down here in the filters panel, you'll notice that we got all of those folder names came in as metadata, and they actually come in as structured data, the structure of which AVAIL does not know, because those file folders could be any words or names. So by default, AVAIL will call them what we call a keyword. But what I'm going to show you is that there's actually a built-in tag editor. So if I click on this tag editor, what we're being shown are all of the tags that were associated with content in this channel. And you can click on these values up here to sort. I could sort by count. So what I'm going to do is go in here and I'm going to show you how quickly you can add a little bit of structure to this. So instead of generic keywords, we can actually tell AVAIL what these things mean. So I'm just going to sort here, and if I scroll down, we'll see things like, in this case, there's a bunch of division names that were folders in that folder structure. So I'm actually going to click on this. I could take an individual and choose a key value from a pull-down menu, or if you, we support multi-select, so I can shift select all of these, or if I wanted to use the control key, I could multi-select in that way. So once I've chosen all of those divisions, I'm going to right-click and say edit these keys. And now what I'd like to do is give that key a value that means something, so that I'll have some understanding of what these words mean. So in this case, I'd like to actually call these a division. Well, if I look in this list of pre-populated keys, I'll see that division doesn't exist. So if I type division in up above, then you have the option to add that key if it doesn't already exist. So we like to talk about this in terms of language and culture. Let me go ahead and say okay, so it'll add those keys. Every firm has its own language and culture. What you call something or the way you think about something may be different than someone else. So AVAIL is completely agnostic to the terminology and the content that you're putting into the system, which allows you to make it very specific to the way that you want to work. So there we can see that we've now given those divisions a key called division. And so let's go add a little more. So here are some master format numbers that are a subset of that. So I'm going to scroll down through here and grab all of those, right click to edit keys. This time I'm going to call it division underscore MF for master format. Say okay, add those values there, or that key. As soon as that is updated, I will add one more key value, and then we'll move forward. So now if I sort by count again, so I'll see the most populous at the top. There's that family, which was the highest level folder that I had. So I'm going to right click that and call it a category. So that quickly we can go add just a little bit of structure to some of the data that was, the metadata that came in as file folders. If I now click on my channel and view it, what we're going to see are that all of those keys have now organized all of those separate values along those horizontal rows that show up in the filters panel. If you look though, you can also decide how you want this information in your filters panel displayed. So if I go back to the tag editor, there is a filters panel representation at the bottom for each channel. So here you can see those keys that are being represented, and you can actually just drag and drop, drag these around to reorder them. So I'm going to take the extension and put it at the bottom. I'm going to take the division category at the top, followed by division master format number, and then those generic keywords. So now if I go back to the channel, you'll notice that I now kind of have that decision tree like I was looking in the detail warehouse of decisions that I might be making for the content I'm looking for. So in this case, I may say I'm looking for these division openings, and then I can drill down to hollow metal doors and frames and make those kinds of choices. So I'm going to show you just, let's go create one more channel, or actually let's pop my Windows Explorer back up. So I'm going to take, I've got a folder of drafting views sitting here. So I'm going to take these, all of these RBT project files and actually drag those into this channel as well. It'll pick up if you drag a piece of content. Instead of dragging the folder, if you drag individual piece of content, they will pick up just the folder name that they're in, not any deeper in the folder structure. So here you can see it's picking up those as drafting views. I'll say okay. There's 71 files. The time it takes to do the indexing is directly related to the size of the files. So if you're indexing very large files, you'll find the indexing process a little slower than the speed at which it'll run through very small files that are being indexed. But as you can see here, it's a pretty quick process with almost any content. So now that I've added all of these drafting views into this channel, I'm going to pop back over to the tag editor and sort this by count again. And if I look down here, there are those drafting views. So I'm going to call that a category and let that update. And now when I pop back into my channel, look in my filters panel, we can see that I can very quickly in this channel now go between looking at drafting views and looking at families that are in this folder and drilling down through that. So one of the features that was just added is the ability to actually move content between channels. So I'm going to go create a new channel. Let's call this one Revit Details. And I'm now going to go back to my standards library. And I'm going to choose, filter down to these Revit drafting views. And I'm just going to select all, Control A. If I now right click on any of these, I have an option to copy or move to a channel. So here it'll pop up a dialog. I can choose this details channel, and I can either copy this content into that channel or move it. And again, the content is not moving on your network. So let's just make a copy. So if I say copy, AVAIL basically is virtualizing the content on your network. So what we just did, while we can have a standards library that includes both families and drafting views, you could have another channel that is just these drafting views. So the content still exists in one place on your network. In fact, if we open up the properties panel, we could see what the network address location for that piece of content is. And that's going to be no different than if we go over to the other channel and looked at that same piece of content of where its location is. So just to show that this is completely content agnostic, let's make a project photos channel. And so now I'm going to pop back on my network. Let's go back over here to a content folder. Here's some photos. Here's some directories with that are full of different kinds of photos. So if I click in there, drag and drop these folders over onto this channel, say OK, we'll see that we're now indexing in about 266 images and photos here. And so AVAIL is designed to be completely agnostic to what kind of content you want to manage on your network. So we'll give that another second here. What we're going to see are the thumbnails for the photos in those folders. And it doesn't take, it only takes you a couple of times of dragging one of these folders off of your network into AVAIL to see the power of being able to click on these tags in the filter panel and get to that content in a much more seamless and I'll say pleasurable way than drilling in and out of file folders on their file system. So here I can choose base 163, and if I want to look at final images or release that and look at construction photos. So even without adding any structure to this data, if I wanted to pop over to my tag editor, I can now see that I can grab these project names like this, add a little value by saying that those are actually project names, and let those update. And then I'll go to construction, design, existing, and final. Right click, edit those keys, and I'm going to call those, say that they're a phase of the project. So again, this is back to, it's up to you to decide what makes sense in each of your channels. I'll now drag the way I want that to look in the filters panel. And now when I pop back over to view this channel, I now have a nice set of structured data. Show me the Crystal Cathedral images, show me the Furman E, and I want to see the design images. So it's that quick, and then ultimately if I wanted to double click on one of these, it's going to, Windows will take over just like double clicking on an image inside of Explorer, including the ability to drag and drop out of these interfaces. So an exciting new addition is that we have now just released a Revit plugin. So I'm going to jump back over to our Revit standards channel, and let's now, I'm a little constrained since I'm constrained to one interface instead of two monitors, one monitor, but I'm going to kind of put these side by side so that I can demo this for you. So if I minimize AVAIL here, let's fill up our screen. So I've got Revit now open, and once you've installed the Revit add-in, you'll get an AVAIL plugin. This is a dockable panel. What you're going to see though is that every time that you select a piece of content in AVAIL, it'll be reflected in real time inside of Revit's interface here. And it also allows you to do multi-select. So you can see that we can multi-select items in AVAIL. They'll show up here. Double clicking on any one of these will bring up its details. So let's just look at a couple of families. So I'm going to, let's come over here and just draw a wall in our scene. And switch our view to a 3D view. So I'm going, again, I'm a little constrained here on this interface, but let's look at base cabinets. And as I make those selections, what you're going to see in the plugin interface is that we will show the types that are available for that particular family. You have the option of either loading the entire family. So in this case, let's go over here and open up our family dialog just so you can see this. So there's no casework already loaded. So let's say load this family. So what this is going to do is it'll bring that family in, and it's going to load all of those type files as options. The interface will show you a little check mark once if those particular types are loaded and available in this project. So here's our casework, and we can see that base cabinet and that all those options were brought in. So if I, let's just right click and delete that out of the project and come back over and refresh. So now you can see that those are no longer loaded. I can either multi-select and decide which ones I want to load. And if I say load that family with those selected, you'll see that it just brought in those three. So you can use this to be selective in what you want to load. Once you have content that's either been loaded, or even if it hasn't been loaded, you can actually drag and drop directly from this interface into your project scene. So it'll both load that family and put you in placement mode at the same time. So pretty slick interface for being able to do that. You can also launch the family editor once you have one of those selected. So let's look at some more content. So let's look at like some doors. So if you have content that have type catalogs associated with them, we'll actually display that there's a type catalog associated, and if you click on that type catalog button, it'll actually launch the standard type catalog dialog from which you can load your families, and what you're going to see is the interface will reflect and show you which of those types have been loaded. At that point, they're ready to drag and drop in. You can also click and right click and say place in the project, which will do the same thing as the drag and drop. So those are the way the families work. If we go back over to our details channel and click on one of these details, you'll see that because that's an RVT project file that contains that detail, we'll actually show you the families that are associated with that. They're actually in roll-ups. These are actually just mostly the standard families that are loaded in every project out of the box. But if you look, there's a new tab here for the views, and you can actually select and insert those views into your project. So I'll just select insert view, and in comes that detail. So if I scroll up here, what you're going to see is that that drafting view was just brought into the project. So that's a pretty easy way to bring in details or drafting views into your project from your standards libraries. Let me show you, this is actually an entire Revit project. So when I click on that, it's going to take it a second. It's a pretty good sized project file. And as soon as that's loaded into the interface, not only do we see the families, but we now get the choice of the views, the sheets, the schedules, and all of these can be inserted. So if I wanted to come down here and say select all of these jams, I can multi-select and say insert those views, and all of those jam details are going to be brought into this project. So we'll see those update here. So we know a lot of customers are using project files to bring in kind of standard sets of information and data at the start of their project. So AVAIL will accommodate that. If you've got those, you can have those in some startup channels that you want to use to kick off your projects. We think though that now that you start using AVAIL, you'll find that you can begin to break apart some of that information and represent it as individual files. And again, you can bring those projects or at the start of a project and be able to populate and bring that content very easily into your projects. So that's the new Revit plugin integration. We're really interested in getting feedback on that. So give it a shot. We're very interested in kind of the workflow and where ultimately that these interfaces live. We're making the assumption that most everybody has 2 monitors on their desktop, so you theoretically could run AVAIL on one complete monitor, taking advantage of all the pixels there, with your Revit interface running on another. And so please give this a try, and then participate in our Slack channel and give us some feedback on what we're doing here and what other kinds of features that you'd like to see. Thanks for joining us.